Good evening. I'm Geoff Hall, and welcome to a special time together to promote my novel, I'll Believe. We are thrilled to have you here with us, and I'm here with Cols. And hi, Cols.
Hi, my name's Cols, and I'm helping Geoff kind of walk through this evening. And tonight we've got a rare chance to hear from Geoff, the author of the book and the series, about the book itself, the concepts and the layers behind the scenes as such. And we've also got a reading from I'll Believe, from a chapter called The City of Riga Mortis. Sounds exciting. And a poetry performance, one of the point of views of one of the characters from the novel. We'll also be having live performances from Transition. And finally, there'll be some questions from reviewers that we've got who've read the book already.
Cool. So, any instructions for our audience on how to use live chat, or can we plow ahead?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a question, do pop that in the live chat on YouTube. We'll be monitoring that as we go through. So do say if you've read the book or if you've got any thoughts or ideas that you want to kind of ask questions about later on. We'll try and get to those and pick out a few themes later on.
Or indeed, just let us know where you're watching from, which would be great to know. Okay, so this is a section that looks at the themes and influences on the novel. So what is I'll Believe? Well, it's a supernatural political horror story, and it shares my love of dystopian writers such as Philip K. Dick and George Orwell. Now, when I've mentioned this book to people, that it's a political horror story, they ask if it's about current events, to which I say no. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump, remember him, Boris Johnson, or the high-flying government of Belarus. Journalists beware, even at 25,000 feet. My influences beyond those two writers would be Rob Bell, Richard Raw, save for his politics, Bob Goodsvard, and Jacques Ellul. Each add a little spice to the dish that is I'll Believe. Beyond that, there is the obvious reference to throughout this movement in Nazi Germany. You may have heard of Hans and Sophie Scholl, or indeed the film Sophie Scholl, The Last Days. One of their famous mottos was this: we will not be silent. We will be your bad conscience. The white rose will not leave you in peace. So this is in 1942-43, when their desire to see political change through non-violence was made public through graffiti on public buildings, which you say things like Hitler and end the bloody war, and the posting of pamphlets to unsuspecting high-ranking people. Yes, totally unexpected, a shock to the system. Needless to say, it wasn't well received by their Nazi masters. This brings us to February 1943, when they were arrested, interrogated, tried and sentenced and executed by guillotine, yes, by guillotine, in only 4 days. This story of non-violent resistance feeds into the imagination of our young group of friends and lovers in I'll Believe. Like the White Rose movement, they question and delegitimize the political doctrine of statism. They work beneath the surface of things, in the domain of deadly and dark spiritual powers. And they know that for any change to take place, there will be a price to pay, just like the White Rose movement. Now, this domain is called the vision space, populated by bestial demons and vampire priests. Not a place of rules, rationality, or reason. Not every time they go into the vision space, they experience something different. And when I think of this novel, I think he wrote this to one of his family or friends. We ought to read only the kind of books that wound and stab us. If the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading it for? Said with passion, no doubt. I'll Believe is, I hope, such a book, one that wounds and and shows us the true nature of the disaster on planet Earth and the nation state. Now, this brings us to Jack Stanza, a great character to write for with his acerbic edge and his political poetry. I'm now going to perform one of Jack's famous poems and a political statement if ever there was one. It's called War is the Failure of Politics. Now, I should tell you that Jack usually performs this after a couple of whiskies, so there may be a night. Oh, excuse me. Thank you. Gentleman Jack, I believe. Anyway, this is the poem. War is the failure of politics. War is the failure of politics. Poverty is the failure of politics. Pollution is the failure of politics. Terrorism is the failure of politics. Ideology is the failure of consciousness. For when politics gives birth to ideology, then the blind lead the blind into the ditch, and then each one blames the other for constructing it. But when we are awakened, ideology will be no more. No race, no gender, no status, just us. Cheers. And now, I believe we have some live music from Jesse and Josh of the Bristol-based band Transition.
Hi, great to be joining this. All right, so this first song is called All That I. Reaching out for something that I cannot own. I leave it while I'm stuck in my ambitions, and it takes its toll. And I know that walking out, you can't resist the twilight zone. And I see that falling in, you break it and you lose control. And I would be a fool to ever turn my back on this. I would be a fool to ever turn my back on this. Don't lose your grip on the things that really matter most. You're listening for the whispers from the start of the morning show. We can be part of something, and I know that that's for sure. We can be part of something, and I don't wanna lose it all. I would be a fool to ever turn my back on this. I would be a fool to ever turn my back on this. Yeah, thanks. We'd like to sing one more song. It's called Another Place, and it's kind of linked into some of the themes that you'll find in Owl 1. But yeah, you'll enjoy the book. Here we go. vacant silence. I tried to speak. I tried to speak. In my sheer frustration, I could not sleep. I could not sleep. And you took me out to another place when I'd taken every risk that I could. And you took me out to another way when I thought I was completely on my own. In my brokenness, I tried to find you. I tried to hurt you. And in my emptiness, I tried to wait. I tried to wait. Then you took me out to another place when I'd taken every risk that I could. And you took me out to another way when I thought I was completely on my own. Tomorrow can't wait. Tomorrow isn't mine. No, no, no. Tomorrow can't wait. Tomorrow isn't mine. To another place when I'd taken every risk that I could. And you took me out to another way when I thought I was completely on my own. Thank you.
Woo. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So we are here now for the reading. Yes, Coles?
Yes, Geoff. Carry on, sir.
Yes. Okay. Right. Let's hope this thing works. Yeah. Right. Now, it's time for that reading from the book, and the chapter is called The City of Riga Mortis. This is an abridged version which is also edited for spoilers. Zip, TM and DM are about to enter the vision space at the city mortuary. They each pause for a moment, took their pins. As they pulled them out, the blood formed a droplet on their fingertips. until gravity took over and the drops fell to the ground. Before they did so, the three were in the mortuary, or at least in the vision space of the mortuary. Who could tell? They'd never been there before. They looked up into the cold, darkened space of a dreary room full of gloom, partially lit by the blue glow of argon lamps. Zip could feel the coldness. Deck was chilled. This was the hyperreal. They all, in that initial shock of entering this realm, exhaled deeply, their breath leaving the visible evidence of life in the deadly atmosphere of this rigid place. They looked around. The room was about 8 or 9 meters across and maybe 30 meters in length as it disappeared into the darkness. Then they looked at one another and were shocked. Hey, the others. How come? Started DM. Zip finished his sentence. We can see each other as ourselves, not our attributes. Another bloody mystery without the time to find an answer, said TM. Right in front of them, they could see 2 mortuary slabs, placed lengthways up the room and with a central corridor going through to a low partition wall. On the slabs were 2 cadavers. The bodies showed signs of experimentation. DM stopped in his tracks. My GD. What are they doing to the bodies? To their left on the slab was a woman partially skinned, her left leg and arm stripped of the epidermis. To the right, even worse, a man with his face skinned. There was a line drawn in front of the ear, down the side of his neck, across the collarbone and around his muscles, forming the boundary when they peeled his chest. The veins, muscles and tendons were exposed. DM stared hard and long over the bodies. Why would you be stripping a dead body of its flesh? They moved on, breathing deeply as they passed 2 gruesome corpses in sealed plexiglass sarcophagi. Their skin looked diseased. If that shocked them, then the next room would prove difficult to stomach. As their heads poked around the opening, TM and DM moved around the corner and slid up with their backs to the wall. To the left and right were rows of LCD screens, glowing in the darkened room, 5 screens on each side. The last one on the left was malfunctioning and agitated flicker. The guys moved onto the screens nearest them. They could see that and could now hear Zip's mysterious noise more clearly. TM turned to Zip. Well, there's only one thing to do, I suppose. The screen, DM did the same. A low light came on inside the plexiglass case. DM gasped and fell onto his backside. Whoa! What the? TM stood back from his case and Zip held onto his sarcophagus. DM whispered across the room, Mine's got a skinned body in it. The woman's twitching. Ours too, came the reply from Zip. TM was still unable to speak. Zip and tapped the remaining screens. The low lights came on. All the cases had bodies in them and their limbs were moving robotically. The bodies repeated movements, some more unnerving than DM's woman, whose eye kept opening and moving around, looking at him. Zip and TM then closing. Another body just kept opening and closing its mouth. TM's cadaver was laid on his side and flexing his arm back and forth. They could think of no scientific reason for this. TM was receiving a charge to a different part of its body through metal needles inserted into his spine. The others were treated similarly for controlling their legs, necks, eyelids, and jaw. The insurgents were all astounded at this room of horrors. TM spoke up. Have you seen this before, Zip? Anything like this? You spend your time around this place. He looked around. Have you had any triggers take you momentary flashes, and that's all? Like subliminal images flashing up, invading my space, and not the other way around, but without any context. Almost like hauntings. Zip and DM tapped on a few more screens, and DM walked the room. At the end of the row was the small anomaly of the crackling screen. This little girl hasn't been skinned at all, Zip was relieved to say. DM moved across from the screen to the case. On the bottom of it was the property of the Everlasting Project. I've seen these guys around the project. They arrive when someone has died. They pay whoever's left of the family for the research rights to use the body. Zip knew something of this process. They're called residual rights, and I think... Tim interrupted. Okay, but aren't people told that their loved ones will live on through donating their organs for transplants? I bet they don't know the truth about this shit. The girl slash cabinet. Every now and then her body would judder. Her eyes twitched and her chest would heave as she took a breath. Whoa, that's freaking me out. DM's eyes were fixed upon her slight frame, naked save for a pair of blue surgical knickers. He leant forward, transfixed by her sweetness, and unwittingly bumped his forehead against the case. Ow! He rubbed his head, moved back, then scrolled down the screen. It flickered. /0822. They're really personal in their care of the dead, aren't they? He scrolled down further. Oh, frack, she had AIDS. Disposal date is tomorrow. DM moved closer to the cabinet. The girl appeared to develop another impulse as she convulsed. Her face smacked against the glass. They all stepped back in shock from their cabinets. Her face hit the plexiglass again and again. And now I think over to Cols.
Hey there, sorry. Saturday night, everyone's hitting the internet and it's gone mad in terms of like bandwidth and stuff.
Right.
That's great, Geoff. Thanks for that. Love your energy and stuff.
Good. Yes, it was painful.
Just a quick little question that's come in on the chat from Friends in My Head TV, whoever you are, wherever you are. What inspired you to use the vision space in the book?
I wanted to have a place that was beyond their material reality and suggest that perhaps even in our own lives, there is a space beyond our material reality, which, shall we just say, organizes our lives?
Mm-hmm.
Any more? Oh, sorry, say again?
For people, again, who might be less familiar with some of the terminology or the ideas around that, can you expand a little bit more on that?
No.
Okay.
No. It is, I think, in terms of what we might call the quantum universe, we are aware that things are stranger and weirder than we could even possibly think. This is just a way of introducing that weirdness, really. But in their very closed world, a world organized from their education to their housing to their employment, there is something else which is, can we say, animating the totalitarian state, a spiritual realm. And in this realm, of course, they see that it's populated with bestial demons and vampire priests.
Cool.
That's me done, honestly.
Oh, that's your lot. Okay, great.
That's your lot, folks. Thank you, Tony. That's Friends in My Head is Tony Perrott.
Hey, so hi. Oh, we got another question actually coming in from Brittany Hall.
Oh, no.
What or who were your inspirations for the main characters?
Let's just look at two of the main characters, Strix and Falco. Let's just say that after Chris had given me the remit, I suppose, to look for a genre that was had a wider audience than the 4 books that we published together, Chris said, well, just do a bit of research, go and check out what's selling. And at the time, I think it was the Twilight trilogy. So this is back in 2012. And I'm thinking, okay, I've found my supernatural genre. Chris's idea of just go away and then write it is just, there's a bit of a leap there. So I am glad that the universe, if you like, intervened. And what happened was I had a lucid dream. Now, to anybody that knows a little bit about Jungian psychology, the lucid dream is a dream in which we can either direct or we can participate in. Okay? So I have this dream of a man walking this red desert. Before he gets to a water hole, he dies of thirst. My feeling there is he must be an artist or somewhere involved in the arts. Whilst the body is laid on the ground in the sand, it starts to bulge, and out comes a woman, tearing his skin and breaking his ribs apart. Yes, very graphic, I know, Brittany, sorry. And she crawls out and washes herself off. And as she is doing that, she looks up at me. Now, I was on the rocky outcrop overlooking this scene as it unfolded. And as she looked at me, she started to levitate towards me. And all I saw in my vision was her face getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so guess what happened? Yes, I had to wake myself up because I was pretty scared. Now, this in the chapter Red Desert, Red Man, Red Woman. And I am replaced by Strix. So Strix is on the rocky outcrop, looking at himself, dying of thirst, and then the woman coming out of him. And this was really the birth of, or the seed of the idea of Strix, the guy that dies in the desert, and Falco, who is born from him. So this is where the two characters came from. That is then just a very little seed. And as we know, all the DNA potential of what it's going to be inside it. And so it seemed to me that I had a seed of a story about these two characters. Then I had to say, okay, well, who are they? Where have they come from? I decided that Strix was going to be a kind of tortured soul, a writer, of course, who suffers from asthma like myself. And his main fear being anonymous. And Falco is from Spain, is from Seville. And she comes really from a holiday that Jeanette and I, my wife, had in Seville. And we stayed in a district of Seville called Triana, which is a very working class kind of area, but absolutely beautiful tapas bars. I can recommend it. And so I crafted this story with the two of them in, and somehow there had to be a meeting point. And that was in the cafe. So that's where they came from, Brittany.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. Like Chris Lawrenson has just popped in a little chat message saying Jeff's memory is incredible. And
I know.
Having worked with you and kind of around this project, it's worth saying, isn't it, Geoff, that actually this is the first book in a series, and there's lots of other layers, and there's lots of kind of backstory stuff that you do with all of your work.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit, or talk a little bit more about that?
So a trilogy. We have a trilogy. The first book is I'll Believe. The others will follow in that naming kind of sequence. The second in the series will be darker and more foreboding. So this is a bit of a spoiler. This is a bit of a giveaway for us. There's a new character, and he is called Portmore. And he is used by the vampire priests to bring all sorts of evil into the project. So yes, Chris, I have an amazing memory. And what happens basically is that we had planned, I think very early on, we had this little app called Basecamp. And Chris just said, just throw a load of stuff in there, ideas. Doesn't matter whether it's going to work or not, just when it comes up, just bang it in. So you've seen this, Cols, and you'll see that it is actually full of stuff we haven't done. However, the story progresses, and also we are introduced to obviously other characters. So we have been introduced in the first novel to Strix's father. We will then be introduced to his mother in the second. Now, the thing that we know about Jack is that he has been resurrected from the dead. So there's a play there on the limitations of material, fleshy living, a more spiritual hope of resurrection. And then the third, well, I'm not going to say anything about the third because
don't give away too much. Don't give away too much.
That's to lead you into the second one. But I have to say that whilst COVID was busy ravaging the country, I wrote 4 separate backstories to the I'll Believe series, written by Jack and Shula, just looking at from their points of view. So what you have is 3 main characters, and there's a little bit of Strix in me there about writing and the need to write, the compulsion to write, but also the fear that nobody's going to read this damn stuff. And so the fear of anonymity. With Jack, it's the political anger. It's the frustration over the limitations set upon him by the totalitarian state. All I can say is a mystical poet and an absolute beautiful person. And yeah, so there's all sorts of elements. There's all sorts of stuff going on in this head, and all sorts of stuff going on Basecamp for Chris to see and for you to see.
Jeff, I got to kind of stop you there. And
yep, good.
On the website, you're writing and posting some of those backstories. Is that correct?
Yeah, kind of. This is another facet, really, of going the various themes. So we have political dissidence, we have non-violence, we have mystical spirituality. And so we thought with the World of Owl, the website, that we would, Jack, Shula, Strix and myself would explore those themes more deeply.
Cool. Yeah, and that's a place that people can go to find out, get a little bit more behind the scenes in terms of your writing,
yeah,
influences, some of those character kind of backstories and stuff like that. We're going to move a little bit on, Jeff.
That's the idea.
That's okay.
Yeah.
The book has been out for a while, and we've been getting some reviews back from people, and we've actually got a few questions from people who've read the book. So I'm gonna ask you those questions, if that's okay, Jeff.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So this is from Richard Wallace. The first book of the series signals a media-rich dimension to the storytelling as the inclusion of hyperlinks to musical tracks. Mm-hmm. Are there plans to extend the media richness of the product beyond music? And if so, how will this work, and in what direction do you see this developing?
Richard Wallace, always the easy questions. Well, as I think I mentioned, there is this app called Basecamp that Chris and I used in the early days. Now, this is 2012-13. And the idea then was not just to have a novel, but to move into immersive storytelling. And so, as you read the various websites in Japan, in Europe, but also this idea of being able to listen to the music that the characters were listening to, or dancing to the music that the characters were listening to, seemed like a very good idea. It was also, how can I say, very cheap, thanks to Spotify. The problem, as Chris will know, about my imagination is that it exceeds our ability to pay for it. So we have certain limitations set upon us. So yeah, what I would love, well, Tony, who's already asked the question, keeps saying, I see this is very visual, very graphic. It should be a graphic novel. And so there's a thought in the back of my mind, just the back of my mind, Chris, just in case you're worrying, that this ought to be also a graphic novel. But as I'm always looking for economy, Richard, I thought that maybe we could do a series of, or one-off of a graphic novel that just looked at the episodes of in the vision space, because that is where the most visceral and wonderful gory stuff happens. And so there's potential there, I think.
Yeah. Right.
I think there's a video on there. We had other ideas, but we are pretty limited into what we can do unless we can come up with somebody here tonight that can point us towards a money tree that is the size of a giant sequoia.
Or buy the book. Tell people about the book. Get them to buy it, purchase it on Amazon and Apple, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump to another question, if that's okay. Dee Lee Henning from Montana in the USA. She asked, what did you learn from Strix in writing this story? And is Strix based off a personal or historical acquaintance at all?
Well, as we know, I am the acquaintance. There's an awful lot of me in Strix. What I've learned from him is his desire to keep on going, to show resilience, that yes, hardly anybody, save for some close friends, are reading what he's writing. So Strix is a true journalist. He writes a journal, you know, and he's telling us what is happening, not just in the world around him, but the world inside of him. And that very much speaks to me, that we can have that balance, that it's not just political commentary, but there is some sense of supernatural, or whatever you want to call it, spiritual dimension to it all. And then, yes, this need for resilience, we have to press on. If we are here, in my case, to write, and Strix's case, to write, then we must write, and we can't stop writing. There is an inner compulsion to share that. Now, Strix only so far has been sharing with characters Calvin. So there is very much an awful lot of Strix within me. And what was the second question?
Well, I can't remember, to be honest. But I've got another actual reviewer who's actually going to be here with us. Dan Gardner, if you could put your little camera on, they're going to bring you in. And he's got a question for you. Dan,
okay.
Put the video on, mate.
Unfortunately, my video is not working, but if you can hear me, is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Perfect. First of all, I'd just like to say,
hey there, Dan.
Hey, how are you doing? It's a really great book. I had the chance to read it in advance, and you know, it's fantastic. Just the different ways that Geoff's managed to bring all of these different ideas in, you know, bringing in like the totalitarian government, the way that it interacts with the characters. I really, really enjoy it and highly recommend for people to go out and get this book.
Thank you, Dan.
My question is quite a simple one. You've answered some of it already, but this is, how did you go about creating distinctive voices for each of your characters, and also the way that they interact with each other?
Well, good question, Dan. Let me gather my thoughts. what I decided is, because this was going to be a series, that I could afford a quite extensive cast of characters. So if this was just one, there wouldn't have been 9 people, 9 protagonists in the group. There might have been just Strix and Falco, Calvin and Christina. Actually, I wanted more than that. So the group here is made up of artists and coders. Now, I wanted the coders to have some kind of mystique, because nobody really knows the stuff that they get up to, do they? So they work underneath the surface. And if you can see their code, then it's bad code. They've failed. And so I thought this is a great kind of metaphor for what is going on with this group. So I had to have characters that had a sense of mystery to them. So that is Zip, and that is TM and DM, who we've just read about in the city of Riga Mortis. Strix, I fleshed out pretty quickly. I knew that his voice was going to be one of uncertainty, and yet pretty strong and to the point, but also at the times losing himself in his thoughts. I then wanted a kind of foil for that seriousness, and so Calvin was developed. Now, Calvin, I love writing for Calvin because he is the character who always puts his foot in his mouth. No matter what is going on, there's always Calvin that seems to drop himself in it. And I love that about Calvin. He's not afraid to speak his mind, but most of the group seem to do that when he speaks. And he seems to be quite sometimes mistaken for what people. Then I wanted them to have Strix to have found love. So in came Falco from Triana in Seville, and I wanted her to have a beautiful kind of accent, but I wanted her to play on that accent. And so she had the voice that speaks of the horse's asses, if you have read that, of course, Dan. And she is just a beautiful soul. And I wanted to reflect a kind of sensitivity of her character in that. And then we have Christina, who is Calvin's foil, who's totally serious, is from the Philippines. So, hi, Danny. And has a seriousness about her because they, with her mother, escaped from the Philippines to Bristol. We never go into that story of the escape, but we all find out about what happened and how Christina was the witness to her mother's brutal rape. And that was the reason that they left. So this has left her with a very strong character, but also someone who's frightened of intimacy. And so that was another kind of voice. And then there's Zip, who is a coder. And I love Zip to pieces. She's hard, seemingly hard. She's quite quirky. She dresses strangely. She has a strange lopsided haircut. And she dreams in code. I thought, what better for a coder than to dream in code? So the first time she sees Jack is as a shadow code. Now, you can see that things are kind of developing here. And there are 4 others, of course, Izzy and Jess and TM and DM. And basically over the series, you will see more of their character and their voice develop. And some of it will shock and sadden you. Does that answer your question, Dan?
Yes, it does. It's great. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you for your time.
Cool. We're now going to go to a video question that Geoff did with his friend Danny. So bear with me. And I'm just going to share that out now. Hopefully.
Hey there, everyone. I'm here with Danny Malintas. And Danny is a friend of mine going back for, I don't know how many years. Danny, if you could just kind of introduce yourself and tell people whereabouts in the Philippines you are and give them a bit of a context to this location.
I am Danny. I'm a Filipino writer. Right now, I'm based in a small town. It is a small town in the northern part of the Philippines, away from the capital. I am writing a review of I'll Believe, as Geoff has requested, because I believe in the things that he writes about. He writes about a change in consciousness, which I think is something that we also need, being a country that has been colonized for many years, won its freedom from colonization, and also won against a dictatorship, but find ourselves now in political conditions that haven't changed really much. So that's
So you have a question for me.
yes. Of course, because I come from a very political setup, I like to ask Geoff, who are the political thinkers that influenced the thinking of the characters in your book?
It's interesting that I think my sense of a political point of view was very much honed in the excesses of the Thatcher government. Thatcher is probably the only British politician I truly loathe. And this is because I grew up in the northeast of England in a town called Hartlepool, which historically was a lovely little fishing village. But then it became an industrial hub. So we had mining, we had shipbuilding, we had, yes, the fishing, and also we had steelworking. And whilst Thatcher was around, all of those industries disappeared, and we ended up with only 10% left of our fishing fleet. And of course, that is drastic for working class people. It was a big industry town, and we saw its demise. It had 25% plus unemployment. And whilst I was unemployed, I then was employed on a government scheme to work with unemployed people. That the irony has not left me. And I ended up working on an estate that had 75% unemployment. And all of those things showed me how bad it is when people follow an ideology blindly, unconsciously. And for me, Thatcher, in terms of Britain, was the epitome of that. She kept saying it was good for the nation, what's best for the nation, whereas actually what she meant was it's best for her fellow ideologues and for private interests, because anything that was a national industry was sold off to private interests. And so I think that the biggest thing that comes out of the Thatcher years for me and feeds into, although it's not really a direct correspondence, if you know what I mean, with the terms of I'll Believe, it is that sense of the nation state ideology being probably the ultimate ideology that needs to be overthrown.
It's interesting. That sounds positively anarchist.
Yeah. The old European words anarche, so without authority. So it is speaking against the authorities in this term of the nation state. So anarchic, but not violent. They are very much influenced by the White Rose movement. So Sophie Scholl, Hans Scholl, Christoph Probst. They're all my personal heroes as well. And you have to look at their context, and they've seen what's happened when there's been violent resistance against the state and how that's being quashed. And their point of view, particularly Strix's point of view, is the more you resist violently, the tighter the iron grip becomes. Okay, there we go. There we have it. So we'll talk now a little bit. Sorry, Carls, there you are.
No, this is Chris Lawrenson. Chris, why don't you introduce yourself, and I'll let you and Geoff carry on.
Woo!
Hey everybody, I'm Chris Lawrenson. I'm a founding member of Uptaka Press.
Good for you. Excellent.
Do you want more than that, Coles?
No, that's good. Do you want to talk a little bit about
Yeah,
your
go talk to us.
partnership and publishing the book?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've prepared a little thing with some notes for myself to talk about, and already introduced myself. But I want to talk a little bit about Uptaka Press because it really is the foundation where a lot of these, ideas and stuff is coming from. So Uptaka Press is a boutique publishing company. But that's, what we are on paper. Really, we're a collective of people and always have been. Uptaka is a Swedish word that means to illuminate. So why did we start and why does Uptaka exist? We started in 2001 as Uptaka Network. So that was just a group of misfit spiritual thinkers with a simple goal to create the deep spiritual philosophical material that nobody else was, to say what no one else would say. And so I want to paint a picture of some of the founding members of Uptaka Network to give you an idea of what this looks like 20 years ago. Dan, he was an English major who played lead guitar in a hardcore band. And now he heads a philosophy department at a university in the Pacific Northwest.
Of course he does.
Right? CJ was a gutter punk and he now runs like a charity bicycle fixing service for the homeless. And he directly supports coffee growers in developing countries with his coffee company. John was an MMA and cage fighter who moved to the Australian bush to serve the forgotten tribes there. And he recently returned to California after 15 years of that voluntary service. And me, I'm a poet, a designer, a writer, a musician. I was on the streets as a kid, so just another homeless skater. We were all misfits. Nobody wanted to hear what we had to say. And I feel like Uptaka still represents marginalized voices. We were creating the work as Uptaka Network and saying those things that nobody else would say, but we needed an outlet, a platform. And I had moved to Bristol, England, met Geoff, and we founded Uptaka Press in 2006 in Bristol to point this material outward, basically. So fast forward 15 years and several books later, and I'm really proud to be releasing Owl. I know Geoff is as well.
Yes.
In many ways, I think Owl is a landmark for Uptaka Press, but also for the modern world of readership, the new generations of readers. We have nothing to lose, so we're not afraid to change the game and release something kind of crazy. So I can't wait for everybody on the live stream to experience the world of Owl if you haven't already. But what I want to say as a publisher is how proud I am of this work and of Geoff. Geoff and I have been really close for many years. He's always been a creative and critical thinker, but I think with Owl, he's broken his own molds a little bit, or maybe just reformed them.
No, totally broken, totally broken.
I'm really proud of what this collective has become, and because of Owl, but I think because of what Owl represents. Like, in a strange way, I think Owl's protagonists reflect the same genesis as Uptaka itself.
Yes.
And that feels appropriate. I think the thinking world is richer for this work and for Geoff. And I hope all the readers see the courage that's in Owl. I think it's the beginning of a story that we all need to experience together in these unique times to lift us up and open our hearts and minds to each other. And that's what I've prepared. Thank you. Really proud to be here.
No. It's such a thrill to hear from you, dude. As ever, just a soul dude. Chris and I, in those 2011, I think is when we first published The Wilderness and the Desert of the Real. And we just had this shorthand ability to understand what the other was saying and getting at. Just you give half a sentence, Chris could finish off the paragraph, that kind of thing. And yeah, I've missed that closeness. Chris is now in Fort Collins in Colorado. I'm still in Bristol, but one of these days I've got to get out there to see you and drink some whiskey. Wonderful. I wonder if it's okay for me now just to say a little bit on the writer's perspective. Is that okay? So, in thinking of the work of the writer and the artist, I consider it in the light of this quote from James Baldwin. Now, I love James Baldwin. Some of you may know of him. He's an African-American poet and writer. He writes this: art and literature, and to help one bear the fact that all safety is an illusion. In this sense, all artists are divorced from and even necessarily opposed to any system whatsoever. And that really spoke to me. He's written that in an article called The Artist's Struggle for Integrity. And that was back in 1963. And I'm thinking, yes, I want to live outside and work system whatsoever, be that philosophical, political, or ecclesiastical. Ideally want to kind of press on towards a goal that is very much based on that kind of spirit. James Baldwin kind of really touches the heart. Aware that there are similarities between James Baldwin and myself, not in our race, but in our heart, in our intent, and our search for integrity within the arts. Because I think we have a lot to say. I think we have the ability to say it. We just sometimes lack the means of doing that. And as we talked about earlier, and Richard Wallace's question, yeah, we could do 1,000 things, couldn't we, Chris? But it's always down to the budget. But it doesn't stop the intent to continue writing. And my hope from this is that we can build a community, that we can build really a conversation about what is happening in this world, politically, environmentally, socially, spiritually, that takes us beyond prescriptive answers and allows us to help people reimagine the world, because it's only through reimagining the world that I think change will come. It won't come through prescriptive measures, through word domination systems like, political manifestos. It very much has to come from the heart of the and the musicians that we've had from tonight. Just love it all. Want to work with people more and more. Want to be in a community whereby we can share our gifts and where we can be led on by one another. There we go.
That's great. That's great. Thanks. Thanks, Chris and Geoff. People were just saying on the chat, there's a lot of love in the room for each other, Vi. And that does come through in the work of what you're doing, but also in the process of how you kind of talk about creativity and talk about each other in that. We're coming into land. Who'd have thought it's just been a whole hour?
Yes.
Geoff, do you want to say thanks to some people, I think?
No, not really. Yes, Coles, I want to say thank you to you, because tonight wouldn't have happened without you. need to tell people that you delivered an absolutely amazing book cover. I know you keep talking about our working relationships, but your vision is quite amazing. I want to say also thank you for the website. We perhaps should point people in that direction and put up the various URLs for that. That website really kind of touches my heart and gives me so much. It's kind of opened a new kind of that. I want to thank Chris really because without him, I think I would have been a little bit like Strix, the asthmatic, who couldn't get his words out there and would probably be a miserable old git. And you actually released me, and so the world can thank you later. I'm just kind of overjoyed to know you and have you as a friend. I want us to go on from here and do great things. I want to thank my wife, Jeanette, me through a very long and arduous artistic journey. Thank you so much. Love you lots. And finally to my mum, Frida, who should be watching this because it's before her bedtime, who's always supported me. And even if she didn't know where she got me from, as she often says. So Mum, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who has been watching. Please spread the word. Buy the book. And tonight, if you subscribe to our email service on the website, we will send you an audio version of the chapter Red Desert, Red Man, Red Woman, which is really where the whole of Owl Believe started. Peace and love to you all.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for joining us on this kind of live book launch with Owl Believe. Yes, you can find out more information on www.worldofowl.co.uk. And as Geoff says, don't forget to buy the book on Apple and Amazon. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening, whatever you're up to, and take care.
Yeah. Just finish this whiskey now.
Me too. I'll join you.
Yeah. Thank you and goodbye.